blank slate patterns. Today we're going to be sewing a baby boy romper, so make sure to check your pattern for all the materials, get them out, get them cut, get them ready to go. The first step to sewing this romper is going to be to take the fronts and the backs, place them right sides together with the lining, front and back, and we're going to be sewing around the armhole and neckline edges and across the shoulders. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance as the pattern instructs. Alright, now that we've got the front and back sewn, I've sewn around the armholes, across the shoulder, around the neckline, and on the other side. It's important to clip the curves so that we don't end up with a lot of bulk when we try to turn this right side out and press it. To do that, what you're going to do is you're going to take your regular scissors and you are going to go into the part of the seam where it starts curving, and you're going to clip all the way to, but not through, your stitching line. This is going to remove some of that bulk so that when we turn the fabric right sides out, there won't be an issue with puckering around that curve. At the corners, you want to cut straight across the corner right next to the stitching line, but again, don't cut through the stitching line. Do the same thing to clip the curves of the neckline. And I like to kind of keep my scissors slanted in one direction. And then go back the other direction and clip all those little triangles out. Now that I've got my front and my back of the romper sewn with the curves and corners clipped, I'm going to turn them both right side out and press them. To mark my buttonholes, I've got a ruler here and I'm coming in a 1/2 inch in from the edge, and then I'm just going to make a mark as long as my button. Now you can see I need a 7/8 inch buttonhole because that's how wide my button is. So I'm going to mark that right on there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Then I'm going to switch on my machine to using a buttonhole foot. This is what the buttonhole foot for my machine looks like, and on the back here, this piece comes out and you need to put a button in it and then push it until it's held securely. That's going to help tell your machine exactly how big the buttonhole needs to be. So then I'm just going to attach it to my machine and I'm going to use that to stitch the buttonhole right on there. See your own sewing machine manual for how to use your buttonhole foot and how to attach it. Now that I've got the buttonholes sewn on my front bodice, I'm going to go ahead and open them, and then I'm going to sew the front to the back. I'm going to show you a trick here to opening buttonholes. You typically use a seam ripper to do this, but right before you insert the seam ripper, it's a good idea to take straight pins and push them in right along the edges of the buttonhole. What this will do is when your seam ripper hook hits the pin, it won't be able to rip any further, and therefore you won't accidentally rip through the edge of your buttonhole and ruin it. Now that I've got the buttonhole sewn and opened on my front bodice, it's time to sew the front bodice to the back bodice. And what I'm going to do is place these two pieces together, and then I'm going to open up the side seams. I want to make sure that I open up the seam allowances as well. This will help make sure I don't end up with a lot of bulk on one side or the other. And then I'm going to pin right through that seam allowance. This will help me make sure that it's lined up perfectly when I sew it together. I'm going to add a couple more pins here. And then let me do the other side. Again, I'm laying them together, and then I'm opening up the sides. So now I'm just going to sew down these two sides, and then the top of the romper will be finished. When I remove the pins, what you'll see here is that we've actually created an interior seam. So I've now got these side seams here, and you can't see the raw edges on the outside of the garment, and you can't see any raw edges down that side seam on the inside of the garment either. And that's good for little sensitive baby skin. So you can see how the top of our romper has taken shape. I'm going to be sewing the buttons on here, but they'll fold down like that, and they will button right through those holes, and that will be how the top is constructed. Let's move on to how to sew the bottom part of the romper. I've got the back and the front pieces of my romper here. I've laid them right sides together. I can tell this is the back even without the pattern piece because it's going to have a longer rise or crotch line back here, and that's to accommodate those diapered tushies. The first thing we're going to want to do is to make sure to sew these two crotch lines, and same as when we were sewing on the top, you want to go slowly around the curves, and you want to make sure that you are keeping that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now that we've got the bottom of the romper sewn along the rise lines, we're going to be finishing these seams. You need to finish seams so that they won't unravel and get a lot of threads tangled up on the inside of the garment. We're going to be using one of the easiest seam finishing methods on this, and that is pinking shears. Pinking shears work really well on cotton fabrics, and as you can see, pinking shears have these teeth on them. So when they cut, they're going to be cutting in little peaks like that. Now the reason that this helps with the seam finish is because this edge here now doesn't have like any straight lines that the thread can just pull down. It's all a bunch of bias cut angles. And the bias of the fabric won't unravel the same way that a straight line or a straight grain of the fabric will. So go ahead and pink those edges, and then we'll continue on to the next step, which is going to be sewing the side seams. Now that we've got the front and the back of the bottom of the romper sewn, and we have gone ahead and finished those seams by pinking those edges, so we're going to open up the front and the back of the romper, and we're going to place them right sides together. Now you'll notice that the back of the romper ends up being a little bit wider than the front of the romper. Again, we've got diapers in the back that we're having to accommodate. So what you want to make sure to do is just match up the raw edges. And if you would like to go ahead and add a few pins to help hold it together while you sew, you can definitely do that. But we're going to get those raw edges all matched up. And then I will be sewing right down this side seam. I'll be repeating the same thing on the other side seam. Alright, now that we've sewn the side seams on the bottom of the romper, and you can see that I used the pinking shears to finish these edges as well, we need to go ahead and we're going to start creating the hems because it's the easiest point to do this. The way these are going to become shorts is that this part here is actually going to be snapped together, and then here's one leg, and here's the other leg. So we're going to be hemming with it turned this way. This is going to be one leg right here, and then this right here is the other leg. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this seam open, and I don't need to worry about pressing it so well up at the top. We're more worried about the bottom at this point. But so we're going to press the seam open, and then we're going to make a tiny little 1/4 inch fold up of the raw edge of the fabric. And we're going to press that. Now if you can't eyeball a 1/4 inch, another easy way to do this is to take a piece of cardstock, draw a line 1/4 inch in from the edge using your ruler, and then use that to help you line up the edge of the fabric to press. So I've got it pressed up a 1/4 inch there, and then I'm just going to turn it again, and I'm going to press it up again a 1/4 inch. So I've created this very narrow little hem on the bottom, which is exactly what we want. And notice I'm also maintaining the curve of the bottom of the leg. The bottom of the leg is slightly curved, and this is because we've got those chubby thighs that we are accommodating. So all I would do then, I could add a couple pins if I wanted, but I'm just going to stitch right along this folded edge here, along the whole edge, and I would repeat that with the other side as well. Now that we've got the hem sewn on the bottom of the romper, we're going to refold the fabric so that we've again got 2 legs, and we're going to be looking at what is the inseam of the romper here. So these 2 raw edges that are left are going to end up having snaps put on them. Before we do that though, we want to add a little bit of interfacing for 2 reasons. First of all, you can see that this is a diagonal part of the fabric, which means it actually stretches a little. We don't really want stretching happening in this area, so we need to reinforce it. We also need to reinforce it because this is where the snaps are going to go, which means it's already a high stress area or part of the outfit. So to do that, I'm just going to take a little bitty piece of interfacing here. This is just a scrap from another piece that I had, and it is around 3 inches long and about 1/2 inch wide. Interfacing usually has one smooth side and then one rough side. The rough side has glue on it, and we want to make sure that this is going to go rough side down, and then we are going to just fuse it right on to there. So I'm going to use the iron to do that. I'm going to hold this seam out as straight as I can, and you'll notice that I did press that center crotch seam open. We don't want our fingers too close to this. So I'm going to press it down one side up to the center here. And then once that is glued in place, that makes it easier to then arrange the other side. And it's okay if your interfacing ends up with a little bit of a wrinkle on it. And so I've got some interfacing here to reinforce. Now I'm going to pull it back up just a little bit and cut off the part that extended past my hem. Cutting off those edges there. And now what I want to do is the same thing that I did to form these hems. I'm going to fold it in 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to fold it again, and it's got that interfacing in there, so this is going to help reinforce for the snaps. Now that we've sewn the bottom edges of the inseam where we're going to be putting the snaps, it's time to attach the top and the bottom portions of the romper. So we're going to leave the bottoms wrong side out, and we're going to take the top, leaving it right side out. We're going to place the top inside the bottom, and we want to make sure that we're matching the front to the front and the back to the back. Remember, if you can't tell anymore which is which, the back of the romper has the longer inseam in the crotch, and the front of the top has the buttonholes on it. We're only going to be matching the outer layer of the bodice, not the inner layer, not the lining yet. So match the side seams, and you want to press those open. And then you're going to pin, and I like to use 2 pins on the side seams so that they stay pressed open. And then you're going to continue to pin all around the top, remembering that you are just pinning through one layer of the bodice, not both layers. If you feel like you need to add more pins to keep the raw edges on this aligned, you can, but I'm feeling okay with how this is going to line up while I sew. And you can see on the inside, here's the lining that I'm not sewing. That's going to be a free edge. So I'm just going to sew all the way around the top here to attach the top to the bottom on the outside. Now that I've got the top and the bottom of the romper attached to each other, I can pull the top out, and you can see that I've now got a whole romper, but it's still not quite finished. We're going to use the lining to cover this seam on the inside of the romper so that we don't have to finish it with pinking shears and so that it won't fray. To do that, we are going to actually take this top edge of the lining, we're going to take this raw edge of the lining, and we are going to press it about 3/8 of an inch. What that's going to do is that's going to make sure that the raw edge of the lining also gets enclosed in this seam. And you'll notice I'm not pressing all the way to the side seams, and that's because I'm going to be pinning, and so that part will get held by pins. Once I've pressed that edge though, what I can do is fold it down, and you can see how that nice folded edge is now just going to cover the seam that we made in the previous step. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin on the right side, right over where I've done the seam, and you'll see on the inside that actually holds the folded edge in place as well. It's most important to line this up and be careful where the side seams are. And I'm going to go ahead and open up that seam and then fold it neatly over. And I'm pinning it on the outside. And again, you can see on the inside how that's holding it over. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around and pin this edge, and then I'll show you how I stitch it. Now that we have stitched in the ditch to secure the lining to the romper, you can see we've got an almost finished romper. The only things left to do is to fold down these back straps, and you'll sew a button on right there. You'll do that by hand, as well as apply snaps down to the bottom of the romper. You can use hammer-on snaps or you can use sew-on snaps, whichever ones you're comfortable with.